chilly, very chilly morning. The Public Safety Committee meeting, our monthly meeting. It looks like there's a long agenda. We'll talk about a couple of things right out of the gate. Let's see, what do we got? What can we start with here? All right, well, Chief, you're here. Give us the Police Department report.
Well, thank you, Gigi. I appreciate the opportunity, as always, every month to showcase what we've done, and this month we have done a lot. As you know, just listing over our Public Safety Committee report, our status of command personnel has stayed the same with sworn employees. We're at 6 full-time sworn employees, no changes there, 1 chief, 5 officers. We have 3 non-sworn employees. The one thing I would like to mention is we now currently, pursuant to our last conversations, pursuant to a conversation that we had with President Mudrick, we now have 1 person as a fill-in crossing guard to fill in for Clota and Elise as necessary during the school year. And that has absolutely no impact to our budget. It really has no impact whatsoever. The good news is that it has been very effective because right now that person is actively working for Clota, who was unavailable to us, and will be actively working for Elise, who's going to be unavailable to us by the end of the month. So the good news is that there's consistent coverage at our 2 mandatory posts in the borough for school crossings. And we'd like to welcome also Charlie Bode. Charlie Bode, we're welcoming him back. He's serving as our fill-in, and he's doing a great job. And as we speak, he's out there right now.
Yeah, well, you never leave the borough.
Yeah. So, and he's been very helpful, and this has really helped us with a stopgap approach. The next thing I'd like to move down to is fleet. There is no changes to our fleet. Our vehicles are fully maintained. Preventive maintenance schedules are on track. There seems to be no issues right now for the time being, and there's no more information on that. The one thing I would like to talk about is our municipal police officer certifications for the year for 2019.
Great. Everything
is on track to be completed by November 22nd, next Friday, for the year. So we have no issues there. Moving on to other trainings and certifications. One of the most important things to mention is that recently as council has named the police chief as the interim emergency management coordinator until a permanent emergency management coordinator can be named. Myself and the mayor have already talked about the policy that was orchestrated by Holly Bonfarrell and Dave Wurzel, which is very expansive, very good, very, very comprehensive. That's being finalized now. I'm reviewing that, and I'm going to work with the mayor on that. The next thing I'd like to mention is our new tax officer, which is Officer Kelly Lynn. She went to Hershey, PA, and on September 24th, she completed training up there to help us along with our training and certification program for the department. The thing that I really like to get into, which I think is a real milestone and really helps shape the vision of this department that we've had since the spring of 2018, is as follows. We now have 3 officers year to date who have completed criminal investigative techniques and social networking investigative techniques since the last one was trained in October. So that's 3 officers out of 5 so far that have been trained. Moving down to the next, we have now 2 officers this very month who have completed new criminal investigator seminar. And when I go back to saying our vision is taking shape, I had a meeting with Lower Merion Command staff on Thursday, October the 3rd, as well as a meeting with Superintendent McGrath at the end of September. Both very productive meetings benefiting both agencies, where we're now on a case-by-case basis doing our own criminal complaints directly with the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office, where these officers are getting the professional development and the skill set that they need to actually fulfill the mission that we have for the department. And that benefits Lower Merion as well. Now, I want to make sure that everybody understands that Lower Merion, under any circumstances, is not abandoning us. If we need their assistance, if we need their patrol investigators, if we need them to take a job all the way from the beginning to the end, they're willing to do that through some collaboration and cooperation between the agencies. So with this recent meetings that we've had, we're going to have one more change to the MOU before it is finalized, because we came up with some language that's going to benefit both agencies. But both those meetings were very, very productive. I'm very encouraged by both of those meetings and the results that came off of both. And we recently had 2 jobs that we had to send over to Lower Merion at our request, and one at their request. So the relationship is very positive. It's very, very much there. And we look forward to this continuing new shift in criminal investigations, because it's really going to help the officers with their professional development. The most important part about this whole factor is the deliverables to the community. That now we have Narberth officers that are going to provide investigative services for Narberth residents when needed. And that's going to be a huge plus in terms of police services that are delivered. Moving on, successfully, I'd like to thank quite a few people. One was Robin Mazanobil, Officer Mike Vernaccio, Elise Pearson, our school crossing guard, and our school crossing guard, Clodagh Meath, who helped out tremendously on October 23rd with Operation Safe Stop with PennDOT. We had a very successful first-time participation with Operation Safe Stop, and we released a message last week about overtaking a school bus. And that's what Operation Safe Stop is about. You know, that we cannot overtake school buses. So we had a successful program. The mayor knew about it. This is the first time we participated in it. And I'd really like to thank everybody that helped us, because that was a great program that we ran that day. In addition to that, moving down to equipment, everything pretty much stays status quo. Our mobile data terminals are all functional. Our mobile video recorders are functional. We have the cost identified for the tasers that need to be replaced in CIP. And just to let everybody know, we do have a new clean administrator with the Pennsylvania State Police. His name is Trooper Charles Wood. He's going to be our liaison for Narberth Borough. There was somebody that recently retired there. So, but that's pretty much our status of command report for the month. A lot to digest.
It is.
A lot of things that were accomplished this past month. And, you know, and that's, if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to ask it. The other thing is, too, is we did a huge bike patrol initiative on Halloween, for the parade, as well as Halloween night. And you know, everybody was, you know, they loved it, because obviously the officers were accessible to the kids while they were driving. So and there was no costumes involved.
I do have a couple.
How do you know? This is great, all great news, John. Thank you so much for it. Really, an amazingly clear report. We appreciate that. The only question I have, the tasers, that was a request for 6 tasers, am I right? We currently have 3 in-house?
We currently have 2. We have 2, and they're getting more, and they're still functional.
We know
they're still functional. They work
we know
well.
that they're the pits, but we'll discuss that as part of our overall budget piece.
But overall, that's the issue that we like to replace. Yes,
absolutely. Okay, great. Anybody?
Yeah. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you hold on, because we go this way? So Rob's first. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
So how about the MOU? Where are we with the MOU? Is that something we'll review as a committee? You're working on a couple changes.
The MOU, Rob, just to explain, the MOU obviously that we have is going to be in place for 5 years between us and Lower Merion. It's usually signed off by 4 people: your chief of police, your superintendent of police for Lower Merion, the township manager, as well as the borough manager for Narberth. So we pretty much had that finalized and was ready to go, but based on these recent meetings that we had at the beginning of October, end of September, we decided on some different language for the investigative section of that MOU. That's the only area that's really going to be impacted. And again, it's to the benefit of both agencies.
We'd like to see it before it goes out, before it gets signed, if that's okay, so that they're familiar. I've seen them a million times, but they need to know what it looks like and what's in the agreement. So that would be great. Before it goes out, that would be great.
In addition to that, before it's finalized, we should probably have legal review it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Let's have John Walko take a look at it. Is that it, Rob?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, so I guess the question is about the investigations as well. So we're now originating the investigations or leading them?
Well, it depends, Fred. It's a good question. It's on a case-by-case basis. I'll give you an example. There's certain things that are going to be outside of our wheelhouse that are basically more appropriately handled by Lower Merion Investigations Unit, by Lieutenant Polo and Sergeant Mike Weiss, which is going to be, and they do actually have 2 cases recently that they decided to take. But with that in mind, there are certain things that we can handle, whether they're lower level felonies and misdemeanors, that we can handle on a case-by-case basis. For instance, if we have something that's reported to us in terms of a theft, and I'll use a retail theft as an example, hypothetically, that happens somewhere at a business inside Narberth. If that happens, but we don't have an arrest involved with that job, we now can take that investigation, see if we can develop a suspect, see if the complainant, the victim, is willing to prosecute, start to work those lines, those networks of communication, coalesce with the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office with their liaisons, and submit those criminal complaints directly instead of actually now going through Lower Merion. But that's on a case-by-case basis. So that's basically what it means. That's an example of what we would do.
Sure. So how is it determined whether or not we need to go out? Is this something? Is there a formal decision process? Is it just informally?
No, well, the formal decision process is me. That information, I'll give you an example. All the information that's entered into our record management system has to be reviewed by me every day. So I review all that information. Now, based on my background, my skill set, my experience, I make a determination whether that should remain with one of our officers for further investigation, or I'll actually have a conversation with Sergeant Mike Weiss and ask him, get his way in. What do you think about this job? Do you think you would want to take that? Do you feel comfortable? So it's definitely a cooperation between the two agencies. But overall, what I'm doing is I'm looking at those reports every day and providing strict and close assessment of what needs to get assigned and where it needs to go. And then when I need assistance from Lower Merion, if the officers, for instance, we may have an in-progress job where there's a scene involved, and Lower Merion we may need their assistance to take the job over. The one thing is about integrity investigations, and Lower Merion is very concerned about that as much as I. So if we have a job that they start from the beginning, then we want that job to remain with them for integrity purposes. If we have a job that we start doing, then for integrity, for the same reason, chain of custody, evidence, things like that, we want that job to remain with Narberth. So there's certain things for the quality of that investigation that we may have to make calls on and decisions where it's going to go with which agency. But I can tell you, I can reassure everybody at the Public Safety Committee that this is definitely a positive step for us in Narberth to move down. A long time were we providing those type of services to the residents.
Right.
Years.
Right. That's why I was
So
interested to hear
larger things that are really outside our scope will still go to Lower Merion.
this. And it's a judgment call that you're making with conversation with the Lower Merion Department.
Right.
Okay.
And also conversation with the officers.
I was just going to say, it's the officers.
These officers know our residents and our business and our visitors better than anybody.
Right.
Better than anybody. So if they have a way in here, they have skin in the game. They're stakeholders in the process where they say, Chief, listen, I recommend, just based on what happened, this may be on my scope. What do you recommend? So that's how the conversation goes. So I think if we have an involved process, a cooperative process, which we have now, we're going to see the benefits of this, and that's what we're going to move towards. When I first came here a year and a half ago, the big vision was to make sure that we gain a little bit more independence from a cooperating agency, and we're now starting to see that take shape. After really in a short time, 18 months is not long.
Yeah, not long
We're
at
starting
all.
to see that take shape, and this is to benefit the entire community. I think that what I'm encouraged about the most is not only the service to the taxpayers, but the reinforcement to the officers,
Right,
to the
absolutely.
professionalism, that they're going to feel a sense of job satisfaction,
Right.
and the confidence that the borough has in them as
Right.
professionals.
Okay.
No, that's a big part of
very
it. So I just want to note, former Councilwoman Fortner is here, and she's filming. And Barbara remembers when we started down this road, long and sordid as it was. And we did our best to come to an understanding of what the officers needed, what the community needed, and took giant steps. So thank you, Barbara, for sticking in and helping us get through that piece. And look, you're here today to see that we're really making bigger strides going forward.
Been watching
So-
over the
so thank
last
you.
18
Thank you.
months.
She was asked one question and it changed everything. That's what happened. She asked one question and we just started to unravel our knitting ball. So
One more quick question.
Sure.
What is the role of a tax officer? You mentioned that somebody had completed.
Oh yeah.
Tax officer.
Oh sorry.
Taxes. Tax stands for Training and Certification Systems.
Okay.
So each department has a tax officer. Now, for a while, we had one of the other officers doing it, but now we switched to another officer who stepped up to do it. And what you have to do is you have to have the certification. So not only does it involve clean, it involves all the training that is orchestrated and required according to state standards under an Act 120 certified police department. So that officer, we now, in order to actually start, her down that road, we send her to training away in Hershey, PA with the state police to make sure that we're doing things on a paint by numbers approach and that we're in compliance.
It is a TAC.
Yeah, I just realized that now. I looked at this. Okay, it's clear now.
Okay.
No, please, we're not taxing anybody.
not tax. And I could hear by the way you said it.
I looked at this. And I saw the discussion.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and also too, just as we have a tax database that we have to maintain, so all that information has to be current for the officers, not only for all sworn
right,
officers.
right.
So that's myself and the 5 officers. That
Right.
information must be current.
Okay.
So that's another part of the equation.
And the long-term strategy to make sure that we have management and leadership that is aware of what training, what information the borough needs, our insurance, our commitment to the MOU, all of those pieces come together. So we have to make sure that there is management and these officers are receiving the training in order to keep just our house in order, but Lower Merion and other entities in order. So we have a responsibility, and thank you.
And
Thank
we
you,
would like to,
Kelly
we really
Lynn.
would like to thank
Thank you.
all the officers that are doing a great job, and Lower Merion, which has been so supportive of a lot of our officers in so many different ways.
Good. Well, that's
Thank
good
you.
news.
Thank you.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
What? Because things were different a little while ago. Thank you very much. Fran, you want to give us the fire department report?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We were fortunately relatively quiet last month, 36 calls. The only one of any significance was on the 15th. We responded to St. Catherine's, which is a school for special needs children, for a child who had their finger stuck in a piece of playground equipment. We were assisted by Rescue 21, which is Penwyn, one of the township's rescue companies, who came in with a specialized piece of equipment, and we were able to cut the equipment free and then transport. Narberth ambulance transported the child with her finger still, or his, I wasn't at the call as I was out last month, to Lankenau, where doctors were able to remove the finger from the equipment without any further damage, obviously,
I was waiting for the other answer.
to the child. So that was obviously the most significant call that we had of the month, and we are at about 315 calls so far this year.
Thanks. That's, first of all, thank you for coming back. I know you were out. I'm glad you're feeling better, and I'm glad
Yes.
you're up and running.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here. Thank you to Penwyn for their specialized equipment and
Yeah.
saving that situation.
Yeah, when you need it, you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so,
We could have gotten her out, but obviously sawing would heat the equipment that she was stuck in.
oh yeah, sure.
So that, needless to say, wasn't the first option that we would have wanted to take, because we're obviously trying to minimize anything, any kind of a problem. They came in with the Jaws of Life, which is basically a
Yeah,
giant hydraulic scissors. And they were just able to come in and snip the equipment on either side of where she was stuck. And then they were able to remove her, take her to the hospital, and let the doctors. I didn't hear how to follow up on. I mean, I'm sure they got her out, but obviously that was something that we would be more comfortable with a doctor
sure.
making the
Yeah.
final. But it's just that there's specialized pieces of equipment throughout the township, and that's why things work the way they work, so that we can avail ourselves of that when the need be. And obviously, when a child is stuck, there's a giant need.
And again, it comes to that piece of understanding of working with outside agencies that we can't. They need us, we need them. That's the way it works. And so we have to work together in all
Absolutely.
capacities of public safety to make sure that the community gets what they need as far as being safe.
That's
and you
always
heard
the way it
Fran, right? Absolutely. Everybody, when you said the figure, everyone went, ugh! Because and I'll be honest, I don't have the stomach for it, so that's why I don't do it. I'd love to be able to be that person. I can't.
Yeah, believe me, when you hear it on the dispatch, that's our reaction too. But, and we were able to, with Penwyn's assistance, we were able to get her extracted in a relatively short period of time and transported to the hospital, where fortunately the doctors were able to take care of her. That was really the only call of significance for the month.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add?
No.
Rob, anything?
No.
Fred,
thank you.
anything?
So Narberth doesn't own Jaws of Life?
No.
You don't own one?
Anything on this side, Mayor?
I have nothing, thank you.
All right, here we go. All right, so let's have a quick conversation. It kind of involves the two pieces, Matt. I didn't mean to make it sound like they were separate. Parking management and traffic, your speed signs.
Sure.
So bring us up.
Follow, Chief Dixon.
I know. So we're just talking about our signs. We don't have anything.
Parking is
Anything is traumatic, sorry.
I should go first. And then let them first. Everybody's favorite topic, parking. Yeah, so what data do you want to hear?
So let's, I was, a neighbor had a question about your speed signs, and you had written me something that maybe they weren't in the best working order,
Okay,
or perhaps they weren't
let's start
as
with
useful
that.
as we wanted them to be, so let's just have that conversation.
So,
Or we hope they would be.
certainly in the interest of fiscal responsibility, we're always reevaluating things and toys that we have and different ideas that we've had over the past several years. And these Your Speed signs were one of them. It predates my time with the borough. I have tried the past 3 years to try to get these Your Speed signs to actually work in an effective manner from a transportation planning standpoint, and just can't get them to work. And so there was a cost to that. It was $3,000 annually just to have access to the online version to get the data. So through conversations with Sean, Chief Gallagher, and Ed Harmon, we determined that the $3,000 wasn't an effective use of borough funds, and so we still have the signs. However, they have gone old school, and they will only be blinking "Your Speed Is" signs. And here's the other catch. In order for us to do that, I have to physically connect it to my computer. So we are waiting for them to arrive in the office in the near future, hopefully the next week, so I can program them, and then we're going to put them out on known speeding thoroughfares.
Right.
If you have any suggestions that you would like us to consider, we're going to certainly let Chief Gallagher take the lead on that to help identify those streets that he believes that through his enforcement that are the most frequently sped upon.
Can I ask a question relate to this?
Sure.
How often is it physically able to switch signs? Because there's a,
So kudos to our public works crew who engineered this movable post thing where the whole sign, battery, solar panel, it's on a pole, and it's just a couple of screws that they can go out and move pretty easily.
Okay, so it's not a big ordeal.
It
to
isn't.
move it. Okay.
I mean, granted, it's not like just me going out there and grabbing it and moving it somewhere. It does take time.
Yeah.
But it's not a major.
No, no, and that's something that I would like to get into the process of moving them around the borough also.
Yeah, right.
Because I don't know if you've ever interacted with these signs. Frequently, those that stay in the same locations, just like all the regular speed limit signs, they get ignored.
Yes, sure.
So that's where we're at. Hopefully within the next month, they will be out and deployed as Your Speed sign, just to, flashing sign what your speed is. It's recording the data. We just don't have access to it because we didn't feel it was justified to spend the $3,000 annually to get the data for data that we couldn't use from a planning standpoint. It was statistically insignificant data.
Got it. So along those lines, when we talk about parking, this is where it comes in. So when we're talking about, we have the parking study and the parking management system. And I know that when that parking study was began, there was a lot of comments and conversations about over-parking in South Norwood, maybe from commuters, and then over-parking maybe around downtown, and maybe over-parking on certain streets in North Norwood. And I just remember Woodbine was one of them where people, because it's not a 2-hour zone, so folks would come and then walk down to the train. I'm wondering if you have seen any increase in those particular areas in this time that we've been able to access the data and look at the tickets of
Based on ticket issuance?
based on ticket issuance, if that information still holds.
When you say overparking, overstaying?
Overstaying there were a number of issues at that time. It was maybe parking too close to driveways. It was maybe cars being left there while, this was always the tale. We were told people would leave their cars there and go on vacation. Because some of the streets in South Norwood were not 2-hour zones. And so we'd heard all of this kind of information, which helped us to realize that maybe there was an issue, and then the parking study began. But I'm just wondering, now that we're able to access the ticket data, is that true where cars are staying on the street 3, 4, 10 days while somebody goes to Jamaica? Or is this, have there been improvements as far as the ticket side goes? I know that we had 100 years ago, 5 years ago about, when the Your signs were purchased, Your Speed signs were purchased, that, coming to an understanding of what's really in front of us. Do we really have, does it happen 7 days a week? Does it happen 5 days a week? Does it happen 3 out of 5? Like, what's really happening? And to get a good picture. And I know the parking study came back and said, we had a relatively good amount of parking for the borough, and that, or in fact, great. We have oversized parking spaces that need to be addressed, and that's on your charge as you go forward. So when things are paved and lines are painted, you have to make the move to tighten up those parking spaces and be sure that there's enough space for businesses to be able to maintain, that quick changeover that they need, and that residents have the ability to park relatively near their home. And remember, relatively near your home is not always the most convenient, but we understand, that there are limits to everybody, to what the residents want, to what we're able to do.
Okay. So the parking system that we have has only been deployed since March, and so every month that we get will give us that much better data. And so I'm not comfortable looking at any patterns until we have a year's worth of data. However, looking at previous months' data, and based upon just ticket issuance, those areas in South Narberth that have 2-hour zones are well below the typical count issuance. The first one for October, the first South Side street that had violations was the 100 block of Woodside Avenue, and there were only 4 violations, and those are 2-hour zones. And there are
nothing that jumps out as you as out of the ordinary for.
No, and then say 100 Elmwood, which is the block,
yes,
right? 4 tickets in October, and just subjectively, on my walkabouts, walk through there at least once a week. I haven't seen much parking parked up, overparked along that block. Let me just look at one more thing.
Sure.
And then in September, we're looking at 100 Elmwood, 1 ticket.
There you go. All right. So that's what I was curious about, was whether there was, indeed, like I said, we heard everything that was happening, and maybe there was something we were missing. But and I think you're right. With a year's worth of data, you'll have a larger picture and be able to understand what's really.
It'll
going on.
help, statistically speaking. We can see short-term trends, of course. The other missing piece that I'd like to also incorporate is the residential permit.
Yeah.
Right now, it's difficult for us, the way the permitting system is managed in-house. It's difficult for us to make a link with the parking system. The parking system has the ability to use to issue, keep track of all residential parking permits. Those of you who have been using it for the visitor parking permits, that's the same platform. It's really snazzy. It's great. It will link all of those active permits to all of our zones. So that's the other missing piece that we need to see, the utilization, how many permits per segment, so on and so forth.
So do those south side neighborhoods get as much parking controller time as the north side residential neighborhoods?
That was something that you could look at in the system. It does not appear to be, just based upon ticket issuance, it's a hard thing to tell whether or not.
Yeah, I guess the question is it just that we're not going there to check, or is it that, we are going there and the rate is
I do believe that we are going there. If you look at the...
I can.
Yeah, I know we're going there.
There's no doubt that we're going to the south side. I have conversations with Rob and our park controller about that.
Right.
We give as much concentration to the south side as we give anywhere else in the borough.
Okay.
I think one of the issues that we have, as Matt described, is we just don't have that many frequent flyers in terms of violations.
Yes.
On the south side, it's a little bit more in control.
Yes.
Just based on the location versus that of downtown Narberth, the other residential areas in Narberth that are concentrated towards. Exactly.
I think one of the issues is there's no commercial, specifically commercial districts over there with meters and other
Makes sense to me.
parking
Right.
quirks.
One of the violations that we find frequent that is on the south side is vehicles parked facing the wrong way.
I was just going to say, you lead me to my point, Chief. So this is where kind of, right, so we heard from a resident, folks parking the wrong way, and some people, we're not looking to catch you with it. So, there are some conversations that the parking and the police staff have had with folks about parking the wrong way. And sometimes they're ticketed, and sometimes it's just a conversation about, like, we're here, you're here, turn get over to the other side of the street. And you've crossed, I know, we'll get there. So it comes with the pieces that I'm trying to get to are the parking strategy, the calming efforts of your speed, and then, of course, there are this parking the wrong way thing, which is what started the conversation. So go ahead, Mayor.
Well, so I've gotten a lot of, not a lot, I've gotten a couple of individuals with pushback who insist on that there's no problem with parking the wrong way. And I just want to reiterate that there is a problem. There's a reason this is not allowed.
Right.
When you park the wrong way, you as a driver are against the curb.
Mm-hmm.
When you pull out, you have to pull out just a little bit to see if there's oncoming traffic. That oncoming traffic could be a bicyclist, could be a pedestrian, could be another car who's coming the right direction,
Right.
and it is in fact a danger, and it just takes a nick or a ding to really hurt somebody. And so there's a good reason that this is a law.
It's a good reason that it's a law, the same as, we don't park on sidewalks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons for these things that we just, we understand that nobody likes the enforcement piece. I've never, I wish everybody would just comply. But there's a reason why, John's here and the force is here, so that there is some amount of accountability and compliance. And I don't know, Matt, if you could even tell us how many of those parking on the wrong way on the street. I'm sure you can. We received, just pick a month, it doesn't matter. But I know it's not hundreds.
But
28 in
also,
October.
also
28.
28.
I've heard.
Stop doing that, Narberth.
I've heard also some folks have said that, well, it's a small street. I would argue that on a small street it's that much
It's
more
even worse,
important,
right.
because there's less room for
And your sight line
flexibility.
changes
Yeah.
on a narrower street,
Yeah.
and you're crossing over. You're supposed to keep to the right. You're crossing over to the
That's right.
left.
That's right.
And then you're trying to duck out behind. Maybe there's a car parked in front of you, and it creates a really dangerous situation.
And just to hit home the point, as I was coming to work one morning, some driver specifically drove across the wrong lane of traffic right in front of me to find a parking spot right near me, and I almost had an accident with someone
Yeah.
attempting to park in this space the wrong way.
Yeah.
It is a bad idea,
Yeah.
and I know people when they're coming home, they might be tired.
in a hurry, yeah.
Safety first. Safety
Right.
first.
Right.
That really, as opposed to convenience.
Right.
If I could just
Go right ahead, sir.
the conversation about violations and ticketing. I just want to keep in mind that we only have one full-time parking
Yeah.
enforcement officer.
Right.
And the universe that we have of all of our parking zones is rather robust. And I
seen that.
I think she's rather efficient in how
Yeah.
she does it, and just want to give a shout out to Robin for
Thanks.
doing that.
No, just
Yes.
It's amazing that she's
Yeah.
able to do what she does.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
With the geography that we
Oh,
have.
absolutely.
And the average amount of tickets that she generates per month.
Exactly. And the number of preschools that we have, the number. We really,
Yeah.
and it's not an easy job. Go right ahead, Rob.
So one other thing, the more data that we collect, Matt, with each month, it just confirms the parking study's initial conclusions that we don't have
Right.
Yeah.
a parking problem on the streets close to the train
You
station.
might have a
like
behavior
Elmwood.
problem.
If we have only 4 tickets a month on Elmwood, we're
It's
right next to the train
right.
station.
Yeah.
And so these are the blocks that actually have tickets associated with them. The system will only give me data that is positive. And so we have every single ticketed segment in there.
Right.
There's a large portion of them that have 0 tickets. And that's the part of it that I'd like to see, because it
Right.
requires some analysis outside of the system to look at how
Yeah,
many
sure.
total zones we have.
Yes, right.
How many have
Get
you
to my
had
point, man.
tickets?
Get to
That's
my
the
point.
point that they don't need to be.
Getting to my
doing
point.
something.
Right.
We have a lot of 2-hour zones in the borough. And of course, in the future, it'll be up to you to review those 2-hour zones and figure out whether they're all necessary or needed or wanted. So that's your task. in the next few years to figure that out. And, then-
Bring it to me.
and that leads to,
And to get a plug,
shared
if you don't mind.
please go ahead. No, go ahead.
Both.
Sure.
The code project, right? It is.
What, Matt? Say it again. The what?
The code project.
Yeah.
It is on my computer for final review. I'm looking to have it to council hopefully by the end of this year to redo our code.
Right.
And I say that because it links to the parking issue. Right now, all of our parking ordinances are all over the place.
Yeah.
Hadn't been codified, so it's
Yeah.
very difficult for the office and for the police
Yeah.
department.
And some of them are in conflict with each other. But, yeah.
Correct. Residents to, it's difficult for them to interpret them. And
Yes.
so this project has consolidated them all, and it's all under one chapter, parking.
Right.
And council will have a lot of work ahead of itself to, this is the first step.
Right.
It still needs to be cleaned up
Sure.
chapter by chapter.
Sure. Well, that's good news. That's good news.
It's exciting.
It's exciting. It took
Nerd
a
alert.
while. Nerd alert. Nerd alert. One of the pieces, so this is what I wanted to get to. I know that infrastructure is working on an RFP and some information gathering from the Real Estate Strategies Inc. of Paoli for the 201 Sabine property. The piece that concerns public safety, of course, is, we have the school there, and Sean, this is going forward. So should any kind of assessment of the property, we have heard from residents about having trouble backing out of the driveway. And, remember that they were having trouble, people parking too close, and it was the drop-off for the school, or so they had estimated. And it could have even been us at the food bank or, even the administrative offices, so that there's some amount of recognition of the parking that needs to go on there should any changes come to 201 Sabine Avenue. So, we want to make sure that the parking is involved in that conversation, and the residents are involved in that conversation of any kind of redevelopment there. So that's what I'm saying. Again, going forward, you're going to have to make those decisions and make that part of the piece. That road was mandated a one-way when it was a school 100 years ago, so after 1978, that never changed. And Matt has told us that we would have to request from PennDOT if there's any change of direction there, two-way, one-way, because it is a one-way for that first half of Sabine, and then it switches. We know that Sabine and Essex and Windsor and Haverford, that those are speed, right? People speed up and down those streets. So that's your charge as you go forward. You're going to have to look at all those components. And if there is a redevelopment, as I said, at that property, you're going to have to look at all those pieces, going forward. So thank you. Thanks. I wanted to throw that in. Let's talk emergency management. Sean, we asked you to come up with some numbers or some ideas of what might have to happen going forward with that piece, financially, training-wise, anything?
But I think that the stage we're at right now is recruiting the permanent EMC.
Okay.
And I've spoken to Chief Dixon about this to see if there was anyone in the fire company stable, put it that way, who would be interested. And that would include Ken Watson and John Flynn as well, our full-time housemen.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't touched base about who that could be. There might be an exciting candidate in there. I did speak to Holly Bond Farrell. She's not interested in doing that for the borough.
I can't imagine why.
So that's where we're at. We're in the recruitment piece right now.
Okay. Yeah, great. And so, but we don't know anything about the training or the dollars that might be needed in this budget for emergency management for training. That's really the piece we were looking for.
Okay.
Is what's required that way. Just so if we have to put it in a budget, obviously it's November, and if we needed to put some money in the budget for that we would want to do that sooner rather than later.
So we did have a meeting on November 7th, just kind of to capture where we're at and what we need to do.
Right.
And there was some initial discussions about radios. About whether we needed radios to communicate from an emergency
Sorry,
management.
I had a different. Okay,
Yeah,
I was like,
from
what?
an emergency
Sorry,
management stand, and so the radios could all talk to each other.
Right.
In the event of emergency, I think there was some thought that the fire company. That's what I heard, that they have a few extras that could be used in the event of an emergency. There might be one or two. That's what the information.
Walkie-talkies?
Yeah, walkie-talkies. It's just important that all parts of an emergency management plan get to talk with each other.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
So we'll have to nail that down and just double check on that. But, because radios are not inexpensive.
Yeah, they're
Um,
$500 a piece.
No, like 4,000.
Yeah.
For this, for walkie-talkie?
This Motorola here, this
Yeah.
could be upwards at north of $3,500, $4,000.
I was just going to say, 100 years ago when I started, they were $3,500.
Yeah.
Some of the fire radios that you have are more, yeah.
Yeah.
We argued about them.
So
The last
that's
time we
not an
purchased them, we
expensive
argued
piece of
about it.
equipment. And then discussed that there will be some training for the new, whoever that person
Right.
is that takes
Right.
over that position.
Sean, do you think we can have, I'm sorry, Mayor, sorry.
Oh, we have
Right.
Chief Gallagher as an interim, person filling in until that new person is established.
Right. I'm just wondering, do you think we'll be able to get some amount of ballpark number for the training going forward?
Yeah, I'll work on that.
Thank you. That's really the component we're looking at as far as the budget goes, and to make
Yeah,
sure
that's a
that
good point.
I's and T's are done there. Next item on the agenda is about the 2020 operating budget. So we did receive the request from the fire department, and I think you've all looked at it or seen it. And if you haven't, then you should stop now and say, I'm not ready to talk about this. Are there any questions, Rob, Mr. McGreevy, that you have?
So we have the operating contribution is 0, just like it was last year. right?
Sorry, where are we?
The first line.
Yeah, sorry, yes.
So that's just consistent, and that was a decision that was made, I guess,
Yeah,
by the council in the last previous
Yes.
cycle.
yes.
Okay. And so the third line, the increase, that's the most significant increase. And
Right.
that's primarily for the housemen.
That's right. That's right. And what, excuse me, Narberth Borough pays the houseman up to $60,000, I believe. We put a cap on that a few years ago, and saying that when they reach $60,000, we would work with the fire company to there be a salary increase proposed, that we would work with the fire department so that they could make up that funding. There, lots of other communities deal with their housemen in lots of different ways. So some of them are not borough employees, some of them are fire department employees, and they are paid directly by the fire company. We have this informal agreement, which I think, and again, Ken and John, they do a lot more, obviously, than just perform their houseman duties. They work with us on projects, and as you said, if they're looking to be emergency management, that's that's a win-win for everyone. But we do have a cap on that. I'm sorry. Excuse me. And we did that just to find, when we looked at other communities and we looked at what salaries were, and that was done a few years ago. And again, up to you, in the next few years, you might want to review that around boroughs of our size and see what the pay is and what the increases are. And they are borough employees, so they do receive, they are on our health insurance and they receive those benefits. Am I right, Sean?
Correct, yes. Retirement, health, dental, vision, life insurance.
Right. Pardon me, I'm
One other
sorry.
question on the houseman. So do we have kind of like a job description beyond the houseman duties? Because I've heard that there are additional duties that are sometimes performed kind of as needed.
Yeah.
Is that
Right. Yeah, you do, right?
Yeah.
That's set? Okay.
Yeah.
Could we see that? Or something?
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
sure. Absolutely.
I'm just
Absolutely.
curious to see that.
Great. Anything? I'm sorry, what?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Fred?
Well, it looks like the big increase is in workers' compensation insurance, which more than doubles from last year. Is that because the borough is paying a higher, it has to pay a higher share? Is that because the costs have gone way up? What's the rationale for that increase?
The cost of insuring volunteer and paid firefighters workers' compensation insurance each year has run around $45,000. The reason you're not seeing $45,000 in 2019 is the borough adopted a budget without dollars for volunteer firefighter contributions. So we've had to work with the fire company on that this year. So that the 2019, it really hasn't increased. It's actually decreased the overall expenditure because we switched to SWIFT and which is the State Workers Insurance Fund, which is really the insurer of last resort and the only insurer of volunteer firefighters anymore in the Commonwealth because of certain risks that have crept into that marketplace on account of an act passed by the state that allows firefighters to claim damages associated with contracting cancer. And one of the causes that they can attribute to cancer is exposure to soot. So really, any firefighter that goes out on any firefight has some kind of exposure. So it's really upset the market, which has driven all of the insurance towards the state collective, the State Workers Insurance Fund. Long-winded story to tell you, we're paying about the same we did for volunteer firefighters, and our costs for the paid firefighters have gone down just a tad compared to 2019. So that's an anomaly in the sheet. If I had filled out the 17 and 18 budget numbers, you would see numbers around 45,000 right there for each of those years.
Fred, anything else?
Well, I mean, I know there's VFRA funds that I thought they were intended to cover workers' compensation. That was part of what their goal was. I mean, I know that's not us, but I thought there was outside money coming in to partly handle workers' compensation insurance. Is that right?
Yeah. That's a bit question best directed to Fran. I don't know how VFRA funds are spent.
The Relief Association?
Yeah.
We get X amount from the state that goes into our relief. We spend that on insurance, 24-hour coverage for the firefighters, and that's also available to buy certain specific equipment that the state mandates can come from a relief association payment, such as turnout gear.
What kind of insurance is that? That's not the workers' comp insurance?
That's not workers' comp.
Okay.
The borough has always paid the workers' comp for the fire department.
Okay.
So with the turnout gear, if the VFRA funds can be used for turnout gear, why do we have $20,000 brigade expenditures in our operating budget, but we're not reflecting any income from the VFRA on the income side?
Well, it can. That's just an example of what can be.
Okay, but it's not
purchased.
Not planned on being done next year.
Actually, we put in and work very hard. Deputy Chief Billy Henderson works on this every year to get a grant. We got it last year for, they say 15,000. It's usually 13, 14 and change. And what we have applied for this year is for PPE, which is personal protective equipment, which works out to turnout gear. Now to fully outfit one firefighter, if you go from boots to helmet and include gloves and the hood that you wear, it's probably upwards of $5,000. So $15,000 doesn't go far. We were hoping to get 3-4 full sets of turnout gear. There's also a mandate from the state, not so much a mandate as a recommendation, that you basically throw your turnout gear away every 10 years and buy new.
Every how many? Sorry.
10.
10 years.
Which, obviously, if we had to outfit 40 firefighters every 10 years in full turnout gear, that would be quite a bite out of a budget.
Would it make sense then to put the turnout gear in like in a capital expense rather than an operating expense?
Well, we try not to do it all in one year. We try and select different people every year to try and re-outfit. We also have, we don't just throw out the turnout gear, but we also have people who are the training officers. And once a month we go down to the township's facility and we have a live burn, which is gigantic in training the firefighters. And obviously the people who are inside the live burn doing the training, their gear is taking repeated beatings. So that's how we try to use our old sets of gear to do that. there's really nothing wrong with them, but at some point, they obviously do wear out.
And every firefighter has turnout gear, so the whole,
Yes.
so in case you ever have the mother of all fires,
Yeah.
you can dispatch everyone and they'll.
Everybody is fully
Okay.
protected, everybody has up-to-date regulation gear, everybody has everything that needs be, and
I'm assuming
just-
that number's around 30 or 35,
it's
thereabouts?
between, with people who are in training now, it's probably between 35 and 40.
Oh, great, that's good news.
We have 4 or 5 people who are in the process of training. And last year we went in with Lower Marion on a grant and replaced all of our self-contained breathing apparatus, which was obviously a big expenditure that
So
we were able to absorb.
So really, with the turnout gear lasting 10 years and you have 35, and you're buying, you have to buy 3 or 4 every year,
That's what we're trying to do.
around $20,000. Can I take a minute just to orient
Sure.
the members of council
Yeah.
to this for a
Yes.
second, and how this connects to our operating budget?
Right.
Our operating budget is connected to this in a pretty significant way. If you're looking at just the expense side of this fire company budget, the shaded cells are dollars the borough spends for facilities, for insurance, for salaries, for fire hydrant rental, payroll taxes, health insurance. Anything in a shaded cell on the expense side is summed, added together, and that's that number 291,177. So that's appearing on the income side. To say, hey, it's appearing on the income side for the
Right.
fire company, that's the borough's contribution.
Right.
If you look at Narberth Borough operating contribution, that was of funds that were given above and beyond those things that are below. What I didn't do with this piece of paper right here is, if you look at the bottom line, excessive income or expense, 83,747. That's because when you add up all the expenses,
Right.
borough or fire company, and you, well, if you add up all the income and you subtract all the expenses, you get negative 83. So in order for this budget to balance right here, not the borough's budget, but the fire company's budget, there needs to be an $83,000 and change contribution from the borough above and beyond the 291 to balance this budget. And the 83,747 is appearing in your operating budget that you advertised for publication.
That's right.
Okay.
So I didn't take, the next step would be to take that 83,747 and plug it in up here so
Right.
that the number down here is 0.
That's right.
If the number down here of excess of income, if it was expense over income, then someone would have to dip into their piggy bank, the fire company or the borough, and
Right.
and
To make it,
make up the difference.
that's right, make it even.
Assuming you earned all the money you thought you were going to earn, and you spent all the money you thought you were going to spend. There's reality, right? You go through the year and
Yeah.
stuff happens. And for the benefit on the income side, the detriment on the income side, benefit, detriment on expense side. So that's kind
Sure.
of the here's our plan, and then here's what actually happened. And it looks like, Fran, the information we got from the fire company, these look like actual numbers from 17, 18, 19, which is really helpful. Appreciate that. And then 20 is the 20 column is a budgeted number, what we think we're going to earn and what we think, and what the fire company thinks it's going to spend. So having said all that, there's a few omissions here. Maybe I'd like to work out for the benefit of council, so council can make a decision about what gets included in
Yeah.
the borough's budget and our funding deficit at the borough scale, where we talked about 2 weeks ago having to raise taxes 5% to meet the difference between income and expenditures.
Because of the two requests, both from the fire department as well as the library at that time.
So let's, questions for you, Fran, on the income side. I don't see any budgeted revenue for fund drive, grants, interest income. And then my follow-up question is, I don't see any income on the other income. It looks like that's sale of fuel to other companies, which I know happens because I see the trucks pull up. Were Were those just ambitions, or are we not having a fund drive next year?
Oh, no, we are having a fund drive.
Awesome.
So I guess we would need those numbers.
So we need to know what.
Oh, you mean you want an estimate for 20?
Yeah, your projected
Yeah.
Yeah,
income
okay.
for the
Yeah, we
fund
can
drive.
project out.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say, I know the fund drive is on there.
And grants are sticky things, because you might budget a $10,000 grant, and you might not get it.
Get 8, right,
So-
or they give you 5, right.
I understand that much. There probably I know with the interest income line item, in other words, there is dollars that the fire company has in accounts that the borough, that aren't owned by the borough. The borough has the fire equipment, and the fire company has its own account. So I assume some of those are interest bearing. If they're not, I highly recommend you look into that. We're earning about 2.1% on our
Right.
on our long-term money market accounts. So, and we're making about $18,000 a year on our just on our general fund interest. So we will need those income numbers, because that'll bolster the overall income on the spreadsheet, and then lower that $83,000 number. And on the expense side, I don't see expenditures coming in the vehicle firefighting items. I see firefighting equipment had spends in 17 and 18, but I don't see anything in 19 and 20. Same with vehicle supplies and fuel. I know you're buying fuel.
Right. Well, we have vehicle maintenance there, right?
No, I see vehicle supplies. I guess we could
Is that-
label that as maintenance. Excuse me, yes we do, on the second page, my bad. Maintenance and repairs for brigade vehicles, I don't see anything indicated in 2020. I see $5,000 for radios and related equipment, and $10,000 in equipment hose. So, can I pause a second on the equipment and hose issue? How long does hose last?
Well, that's also hard to judge. You can lose hose, you can lose brand new hose in one instant.
No, that's true.
So, sometimes.
Like normal wear and tear, would it last more than a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can expect that. What we're looking to replace is obviously everything on the new engine, which went in service this year, is new this year. What we're looking to replace is some of the hose on the 2 other engines that were probably new on there when those engines went in service, but those engines are now about 10, 11 years old, and the other one's about 22. So just depending on normal wear and tear, hose gets dragged, hose gets pulled not just through homes, but it gets pulled down the street. So it's difficult to put a 150-foot length of hose will last 12 years. It's hard to say that because exigent circumstances can come in and
stuff happens,
Yeah.
especially with firefighting equipment.
Yeah.
You might even go with that's why it costs so much to insure the vehicle.
As I said, we
They
lost
may not come back.
We lost a piece of apparatus a number of years ago at a call. So, I mean, there's a lot of gray area in that. The other thing, I know some of the things that are listed as contributions to the fire company from the borough. I know that's not a precise, to say contribution, but if the fire company ceased to exist next year, the borough would still owe Aqua the hydrant rental.
Yeah, sure.
So the money to say that the hydrant rental goes to the fire company isn't particularly accurate, because you got to pay for the fire hydrants whether the fire company's here or not. Aqua doesn't care whether you have a fire company or not. They want the money for their
Aqua doesn't care about a
water.
lot of things.
I admit there's gray area in this, and we're trying to talk about boundaries and relationships, and I totally get what you're saying.
So I'm just saying that the housemen do a lot of work that is not strictly related to the fire department either.
And public works employees are paid hourly wages, and they ride trucks to incidents.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of gray area that
We have a lot of
we
crossover.
can't get this down to the exact penny.
No,
Right.
I did say it on the record at our public meeting, I'll say it one more time, the state of Pennsylvania has to make a choice, Fran. whether we're going to professionalize firefighting services or whether we're going to nickel and dime each borough and community and you and all of you and everybody in the public, whether that's your taxes or whether that's your donation. The fire company accepts donations. They are, what's your code? You're a nonprofit. So if you value the fire department in this town, if you value and you like it and you're looking at us and saying, why can't you just do it? We actually need you to give a gift to the fire company. We need you to give a gift to the library. When I first sat down here, had we continued on the course of making the same payments without a transparent process to the two entities, we would have been paying one of those two entities over $145,000 a year for operations. It wasn't you. And so you know, we're in such a better place with understanding what the true costs of these two entities are. We appreciate their partnerships. We understand that they have to do their part in grant writing and asking for dollars from the public. We have to do our part in making sure that the pieces that are mandated by the state and further are handled on our side. It's a cooperation. And Sean, do you feel okay putting those missing pieces in an email to Fran and Mr. Henderson, sorry, and I lost his name, and that we need those back sooner rather than later because we're going to have to make a recommendation to Finance and Administration. So as soon as you can get that stuff back, that would be great.
And here in Narberth, here in Lower Merion, we're relatively an urban setting.
Yeah.
If you go out in Pennsylvania, there is no appetite for a professional fire department in
We understand
Susquehanna and Deer Run and Salt Lake, Pennsylvania, but they all have a lot of pull in the legislature.
Yeah.
So
for now. We'll see. Things change, Fran.
Just out of necessity, I don't see the volunteer service, although it is certainly under pressure and not just monetary wise, but volunteer wise.
Yeah.
People who are moving to town aren't.
We need their contribution and we need their volunteerism.
Yeah, we could use increased members on the apparatus because obviously not just Narberth, not just Lower Merion, but all across this country where I think 80% of the United States is covered by volunteer firefighters.
Yeah.
Volunteers are way down because people are too busy, and I understand, and it's just not the way it used to be because time marches on.
That's right.
But without men and women riding the apparatus, the volunteer fire service is under a lot of pressure. And we want to keep doing the job of protecting the residents and their property,
it's
and we want to
safety piece.
We want to keep
precarious place of
getting children whose fingers get stuck in playground equipment free, and not just leave them hanging there. So,
but we have a fiduciary responsibility.
Understood. As does the fire company.
As
does the fire company.
So I think Fred has a question.
Sorry. Speaking of fiduciary responsibility, what does the recreation line item on the budget cover?
That's just for the active members club and social things that the fire company does during the year, banquet and purchasing T-shirts and we have a holiday party and it's just something for the volunteers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because if it's just come down at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's 5 degrees, you have to go to a call and then nothing. It's already hard to recruit volunteers. It's nice to there's something besides.
20 degrees over there.
Right. Yeah.
Rough. Thank you. We will get those points of information out to the fire company, back to this organization, to our committee, and then we will make our decision and recommendation to Finance Administration at the next public meeting. Is that okay? Which is a week from today. We do.
6:30 is finance.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you. Finance Administration is at 6:30. So, thank you. Is there anything else anyone wants to say?
Sorry, just how long? So this is going to go. So we're going to get the information and then bring it to finance. And run that by.
We're going to bring our recommendation to finance. So you'll be given the information that's missing here.
So we'll have to make a recommendation.
You'll have to make a recommendation
between now and finance committee.
Well, at that meeting, you can make it. Yeah, we'll make that recommendation.
At the public meeting? I mean, at the full borough council meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Just
checking.
Yes.
That's fine.
No, it's okay. We're good. Anyone have anything else they want to add or bring up at this time? Sean?
Yeah, just to reiterate, our process with any budget and with our budget amendment moving forward is that we're going to compile a list of suggested changes that I'm thinking about doing it in a spreadsheet format, so it will be labeled, what is the type of change, where did it come from?
Right.
There'll be a list of administrative changes, things that Matt and I have continued to work on. We've found some cost savings in a couple of things. And we'll illustrate those as things that we've developed independently. And then there are the list of changes that are to be sent by email to the president, the chair of finance, and copied me. They're put in that Word doc that I sent around a link to. I'm just going to compile all of that,
Yeah.
put it in an inventory.
Great.
With $1, if I can fix a dollar amount to it, I will, plus or minus.
Right.
And that menu will just be on the table, a motion, there'll be a motion at our business meeting to amend the draft operating budget. Second discussion, and you all are going to figure out which things are in, which things are out on that list of options. And then only after that motion has been approved will I go in and actually change the budget.
Right. May I ask one thing? The firefighters were given a tax rebate,
Yes.
and I would like to see that reflected in this document, or a document. I don't know where it is in the bigger budget, but it needs to be reflected somewhere.
It's in the budget. The big
It's in the
budget.
larger piece?
It's in the larger budget, yeah.
I'm wondering
you're
where-
right, you're right.
It should be here.
Anything, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, you're right.
Okay.
You're right.
Right. And before the legislature, there are more potential give backs to firefighters, which I both understand and I have a concern. Small communities like ours have to weigh those heavily and what's going to be adopted and what isn't, because it affects the overall budget. So while we understand, we appreciate the service, it becomes this question of, do we professionalize, don't we professionalize, what are we doing, and how much are we going to, because here it is, it's like a piece here and a piece there and a piece there, instead of saying, making the decision.
Needless to say, professionalizing costs a lot more than volunteer.
It all costs a lot, Fran, it all
But
does.
a lot more.
That's why a decision needs to be made.
That's
Right.
Three
It's not
shifts.
going to be us.
3 shifts, 7 days a week.
I hear, listen man, I'm
And
with you.
Another union for you to joyously negotiate with.
I'm not, we can't sit here in the protection of the community and pretend like that's not a piece that concerns all of us every day. As much as you're doing it, we're concerned about what is and isn't being done on your behalf, what isn't being, our contribution, the public's contribution, their tax contribution, their gifts. It's a lot for small communities to balance this, and I feel like we're throwing crumbs at an issue that actually needs a bigger conversation and a bigger piece, which I believe the leadership of Harrisburg, when they were elected and entered into their position, said that they were going to tackle, and it's been 5 years, and that hasn't happened. So that's my point, Fran, is that someone has to make a choice. Seeing no new business before us, we are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.